I am going to call the Capital Planning Committee meeting to order Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. It's currently 8:01 p.m. Apologies for the late start, but we wanted to give our ARPA committee members a chance to finish up their business. The first order of business for us tonight is the approval of meeting minutes from May 2nd, 2022. These were drafted by Joe. Any comments for Joe? Jeff, go ahead.
I have one. I'm not sure. It's more procedural. If we had let's see, on section 4, if we had an original motion that was never voted on and withdrawn, do you have to note that in the minutes?
Number 4. I'm not. You're in the NERI discussion?
Yeah, I just know this because I had to actually resubmit the motion. I think Joe originally did, and then withdrew it. I just don't know if that's needed, if it was never voted on, just more procedural.
If a motion was made and withdrawn, it should be noted in the minutes.
Okay, so that was my one comment.
Okay, so I should put in you withdrew a motion under the NERI feasibility?
I think that you made a motion, Joe, and then you withdrew it, and I made a motion.
Oh, okay, so I'll just say Mr. Palmer made a motion and withdrew it.
Yeah.
Sure.
You might want to just add some subs. I don't recall what the motion was around. It was probably clarification, if my memory is serving me correctly, of why you withdrew it.
So I think I went back. I was watching a little bit. I think it was because the motion was about the committee to build a new school rather than exploratory or feasibility study, just about NERI in general, not necessarily about a new school or something to that extent.
Okay, so if that's what happened, I would just recommend that we say, Mr. Palmer made a motion related to Article 16 or Article 15, sorry. After discussion, he withdrew the motion, and then we have what Jeff actually moved.
Yeah.
Are there any other comments on this? All right, I will make a motion that we approve the minutes with the one clarification that Jeff noted.
Second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Hark.
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Schoner.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye.
And Malinowski is aye. So that is 5-0. Next update is chairs and members update. So my update is NERI Building Committee. I think everyone is aware that that article did pass by the 2/3 majority that was required at town meeting. The committee has not met since since town meeting, mainly because we're in holding pattern for MSBA now to be ready for us. That date is August 1st. My understanding from the superintendent is that he has reached out to MSBA to just kind of give them a heads up of where we're at this point. And the committee will likely be meeting again soon to just chart the path forward while we wait, which will probably not be a lot, and to approve some meeting minutes. So that's the update on NERI Building. Any questions? Joe, over to you for the Shopsy South Union.
We are finally going to be meeting up again. The chair is going to introduce a template for a report that will be submitted to the select board, and I would expect us to have at least a finished version of the report. Well, I'm not going to make any predictions given the way this has gone, but certainly in the next 2 or 3 meetings, there should be a finished report submitted to the select board. As I've expressed before, the findings will be that yes, it can be developed for affordable housing. There'll be some details in terms of types of funding, types of projects that would be recommended, what's possible under current zoning, and advice that was given to the committee by builder and architect that came in as well. So But I think, as any one of these reports, you're going to have to, this is just the starting the process. So you're going to have, the public vetting type of project, the actual grants, all those sorts of things going forward.
Great. Any questions for Joe? Thanks for the update, Joe. My next item was everyone should have received a note from Melanie in the select board's office about reappointments. I just wanted to provide a little clarity. Our charge as a standing committee, even though it was approved by town meeting, is not official until the Attorney General signs off on it, which likely won't be till the fall. So the select board will have to reappoint all of us starting on July 1st. And Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I assume it would be an annual appointment, but then there would be some sort of dissolution event once there's some permanency, and then we would be appointed to staggered terms at their desire.
Yeah, that's right. I don't necessarily think I'd call it disillusion. I think, assuming everybody wanted to continue to serve, you'd be moved over to the new committee, but then the board would have to decide who is going to get what term. So, yeah, kind of what Jason said without the disillusion part.
Okay. So I guess my two plugs are, please respond to that one way or another. And if you choosing not to be reappointed, I would greatly like to know that, because we do have one open position already. And then due to the wording in the charge that exists in the bylaw, Lisa and I cannot both be on capital planning and the Neary Building Committee, but the select board hasn't discussed those roles yet either. So that's going to be in a holding pattern, but there's a chance we could have to lose one other member depending on what happens with Neary. So that being said, if you have any questions, let me know, but I just wanted to remind everyone to reply to that, because there have been many instances in the past where people haven't replied to it, so they don't get reappointed. They intended to be reappointed, and then it impacts our ability to hold meetings. Any questions? All right, I'm going to move on to item 4, action on resulting decisions from town meeting. CIPC bylaw. So as everyone knows, that passed. I think I just pretty much gave the relevant update related to that. None of it becomes effective until we hear from the Attorney General, which I'm sure Mark will let us know when that happens, late summer, early fall. The next is road maintenance funds. As everyone recalls, there was some language in the actual capital article related to what our role will be until the Public Works Planning Board and all of the associated commentary related to it is kind of streamlined or figured out. So we will need to decide what our next steps are in terms of what we're going to do from a process perspective moving forward, and what we intend to do, because we are required to have a public meeting that I would intend to publish well in advance of the 48 hours that's required under open meeting law, for Karen to come to us and present what she is thinking in terms of her next RFP that would have to go out for proposal and go through the public bidding process. We do know that there is enough funds to certainly do something. There's some other projects that could be tagged in, some of which we'll probably talk about tonight in some fashion, but Karen is certainly not ready to have that conversation yet, is the last word I got. There's obviously some outstanding items related to the park in the center of town, as well as Northborough Road, that I think she's looking to resolve first. So, but what I wanted to do was try to get a little bit ahead of this and throw an item out that certainly has been discussed on some committees before. I cannot necessarily recall it being ever discussed at Capitol, but the goal here moving forward is to create better transparency of the roads that would be included in road packages. And as you can imagine, everyone believes that their road in town is the worst road in town. And, there's a significant amount of judgment that goes into, deriving some of that. My recommendation is that we consider, after discussion here tonight, potentially sending a letter to the select board requesting their permission for use of Chapter 90 funds to actually go out and do a formal, I'm not sure if it's an RFQ or RFP process, to hire a vendor to actually do a full analysis of the roads and basically grade them is how I understand the process works. I know Mr. Stivers in particular has spoke to the Lexington, the way Lexington has done their roads, recently, and the maintenance that now goes into them is far less and more cost effective. And I think if we're going to create credibility in the process, an outside in perspective is I think warranted in this case to create that transparency and understanding of where our issues are. But I also think it is to help inform decisions moving forward, not only in terms of priority, but how much funding we should actually be allocating in a given year from a capital perspective to road maintenance. Do we need to take on a special one-time project as an example to get caught up, or are we actually better off than we think we are? So that's my very long-winded introduction to the topic, and would welcome feedback and other ideas on next steps and reactions to what I've said thus far. Go ahead, Joe.
Are we, somebody brought to my attention that, and I don't know if Lexington's one of the towns, but they do sort of a laser grading. Is that sort of the thing that we're talking about? So maybe the rumor mill hit me too, which sounded like a pretty interesting idea. You have not heard any figures as to what that might run as, have you?
No, I don't know.
No, because
My guess is it would there would probably be something up front,
yes,
right?
yeah.
And then, there would be an ongoing maintenance fee of that plan moving forward. But I think you also have to remember there's obviously a lot of infrastructure under these roads as well. Just thinking about the areas of town that have water, right? And trying to tie some of that together. We obviously just approved a $2 million water main down Newton Street. So if there are ways to tie some of those things together, my understanding is it does that, but I think it will come back to how well crafted the RFP or RFQ actually is, and the qualifications of the firms that would reply to such a RFP or RFQ.
Yeah, it'd be interesting also to hear, to actually see what one of the reports actually looks like and how well detailed the laser evaluates and how it does. But yeah, I'd be very interested in hearing it.
All right, Karen, you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, two questions. What is the laser process you're talking about? And then the second question is, Jason, do you have any rough cost estimate of how much it would cost for the consultant?
I don't think we know until we do an RFP process, which, Mark, unless you have indicative pricing from your peers that have done this before, but we don't spend anything to do an RFP or RFQ process other than the advertisement that would go into a central register. So let me just throw something out there. Let's just say it came back and it was astronomically high by anyone's definition, and the cost benefit didn't make sense. Then there's no obligation to accept it. Is, I think, one of the key things. But I don't think until you go out and say Southborough has X amount of roads, miles of road. This is what we're looking to do. But Mark, I'll let you answer that if you have anything more descriptive than the broad answer I gave.
So, I assume, what we're talking about here, I kind of know as a pavement management plan, which, kind of puts together, takes all of the streets and the roads in town, looks at, their condition, looks at their age, last time they've been maintained, infrastructure that's underneath the roads, is, not only water, but any drainage, things like that. And takes all that information, compiles it together, gives you an idea of what it's going to cost, for any maintenance and upgrades on those roads, and then kind of grades them, and helps to provide you guidance and a roadmap, so to speak, as to, where's the best place that you should spend your funding to get the biggest bang for your buck. I know they're not cheap, but I hazard to put a dollar figure on here, because I don't want to give the committee either hope or heartburn. But I do know that, you can use Chapter 90 money for this. You can use other funding sources, if we could identify them, for something like this. It is something that I know has been talked about, but we've never actually pulled the trigger on something like this. I think it's a good planning tool. I've been in communities that have had them. It does make some of the planning pieces easier. And if you've got $5 million to put into the roads, it gives you an idea of where to put it, and what has the greatest need. And again, what's the biggest bang for your buck and the best return on your investment. So that's pretty much all I can add at this point.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a good idea. Do we know how much Lexington paid?
I don't. I'm waiting for
I don't.
Jason to unmute.
I don't.
Okay.
But I think that would be something we could research if the board was open to, soliciting this sort of RFP, RFQ. I also don't know. I think we all know, some, similarities and differences between Lexington and Southborough, but I don't know how many roads they have that they, miles of roads that they maintain. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably a main driver of some of this, and what the traffic counts are on some of those roads too. I'm not even going to venture a guess.
Right. I hear you. That might not be the most relevant figure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, we're not recreating the wheel here. The template, the form, everything is pretty much going to be the same from community to community. It's simply the time and the effort for gathering all the data, get everything in, compiling everything in that. It's really just a tedious process getting to that point. So yeah, it's not hard. It's just time consuming.
Any other suggestions on next steps? All right, so for purposes of discussion, I'll put a motion on the table that the capital planning committee support a letter to the select board requesting that they authorize the town administrator to issue the appropriate RFP or RFQ to explore a pavement management program, and upon receipt of such proposals, hold a public meeting to determine whether the cost benefit is there and determine the appropriate source of funding, whether it be Chapter 90 or other available funds that the town has. Is there a second?
Second. Would that also allow us the chance to have a firm do presentation to us? So we would have prior time to look at the report and be a little bit more informed upon the process as well as the cost?
So Mark, would you think that this would be an RFP or an RFQ?
I'm really hoping I can find something on the state bid list. I can avoid all that trouble. Which would then, really streamline the process. When we had to do the ADA self-evaluation transition plan, everybody was dreading putting together an RFQ and RFP for that process. And one of the local planning agencies happened to do all the work for us and the contracting, and we simply need to sign up. So let me find the path. So this may be a quicker discussion, or it may be a little bit of a process, and we'll reconvene on this sometime in July.
And Joe, to answer that, I would think regardless of what path we do take, we, if we're being charged with helping to vet a plan, we can determine how best to make sure whichever vendor or successful respondent we're comfortable with, much like we did on the OPM right last year for the townhouse, much like we did when we did the space needs study. So I think you can direct that as we see fit. And I think we have a pretty solid history of transparency and open interviews in our public meetings.
Yep, we all know they're gonna ask, does Capital have an opinion?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we would have that leeway if that's the road we want to go. And I'm not going to repeat the motion, but for purposes of any letter that goes to the select board, I will also add the word state bid list in there, in addition to RFP, RFQ, to give Mark kind of the leeway to work with the board from that point forward in terms of next steps. Any further discussion on this topic? All right, let's do a roll call vote. Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. All right, Northborough Road culvert. Is everyone up to speed on the discussion that occurred at town meeting related to this specific topic? Or do I need to rehash anything? Tony, I see you shaking your head no.
I am not up to date, but so I'll leave it to you how much you want to cover.
I think I can do it in a minute. You can start your timer now. So when we last met as a committee, we made a recommendation to the select board in advisory. All three committees boards were on the same page because of how high the Northborough Road culvert came in from an actual bid, to basically withdraw the funding request at town meeting and allow everyone a chance to breathe and, go back to the drawing board to see what we could do. As you remember, there's a state funding aspect to this and there was a local funding aspect to this. That amendment actually failed on town meeting floor. There was a lot of proponents for let's just get this done. And there was a lot of pressure put on the moderator in particular to allow other motions that he did not allow them to actually be made, to reallocate funding from other capital articles to fully fund Northborough Road. So where we landed at the end of the night is we still have the funding from the state, which Mark has confirmed we have until the June of 2023 to use. We have $38,000 that was funded via the tax levy to cover a portion of it, but we are still short to the tune of just over $80,000. So there was a lot of strong opinions on this, and the select board have asked us to weigh in on what our proposed next steps are. Mark has cautioned them, and I'm sure will caution us that these bids are going to expire, especially the low bidder. And if we don't chart a path forward like ASAP, we're going to be in a rebid process. And if that's where we end up, that's fine. But like these things only last for so long. So the select board has asked us to weigh in. I will also remind everyone of a comment I made on stage when the debate was going on that, while it wasn't necessarily on your radar screen, as I'm looking at the two ARPA committee members, the select board does have the authority to allocate ARPA money, and that it's up to them whether they want to do it for this case. Otherwise, we would be looking at either using Chapter 90 money or waiting for another future town meeting or doing a rebid. So I'm going to lay some options on the table, and then I think we should have a discussion around them and go forward. So I think option one is actually, before I throw out the options, I think my personal opinion is it's not capital planning's job to tell the select board whether to keep a road open or not. They ultimately control the roads in town, and I think they need to make a decision based on prior discussions that they've had, particularly with the butters on Chestnut Hill Road, that are looking for similar road closures, of whether Northborough Road, in particular, that stretch, is vital to keep open. I think if their decision tree tells them, yes, that road is necessary to be open, whether it be for public safety or just ease of use of commuting through the town, then I'm going to propose these three options. Maybe a fourth, depending upon how I roll them out. Option one is to authorize use of ARPA funds to finish the project and cover any shortfall on the bid. Option two is to acknowledge that the bid is just way too high and to pull the plug on the project now and make a decision of whether they want to rebid it in the short term or wait and hope that inflationary pressures calm down, closer to end of the summer, early fall. Option three is to use available Chapter 90 and or road maintenance money to finish the project, which technically would require a vote of the select board and probably further discussion of capital planning. Those were kind of the three options that I could think of. So before I think we debate those three options, are there any fourth or fifth or additional options that anyone wants to throw on the table for purposes of discussion and debate? Okay, so
Jason, what about, is anything going to go as an option towards special fall town meeting? Or does the decision need to be made even before that takes place? Mark?
go ahead, Mark.
Just a couple of facts I think that may help to provide some information to you. So the town received a $70,000 grant from the state's ARPA funding for this purpose. And that was set to expire this coming June 30th. We did extend that out until June 30th of 2023. I think the state would work with us, to maybe extend that a little bit further, probably not another year beyond that. The work to be done, conservation is going to require that be done at a low flow period of time. So we would have to probably do that work end of July, beginning of August. They really want that, in the dry season. So if we miss that window, we're likely going to have to wait until the following year to do it. The bid that is out now, the bid that we have in hand now, is ripe. And, we could be losing those bidders at some point because you're supposed to enter into a contract within so many days after the bid is completed. There's been some comment about potentially rebidding this. But I think that the view is that we had 20 bidders pull plans for this project, and we had 5 return bids. The bids ranged from 192.5, which was the low bid, up to just under $300,000. So I think you've got a pretty good sense of where the market is. I don't see that changing in the near future, and putting it back out to bid, you run the risk of potentially ending up with a higher bid, and now you're in a different situation. So I think that the board is going to have to make some decision on this at their meeting next Tuesday, and take whatever guidance that capital is able to give them. But this bid is not going to be a viable bid for all that much longer. The low bidder has reached out to us and kind of wants to know what's going on. They're excited to start. They're excited to do the work, and they're just waiting to find out what the town's decision is. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of color for the discussion.
Thanks, Mark. Go ahead, Karen.
And Mark, the current bid, they're able to do that work this July and August?
Yes. Yeah, the low bidder has already started. Now, again, it's, we have not signed a contract. We have not, incurred any liability to pay anything at this point, but the low bidder has already started to get some prep work done, so that they could be ready to go when we need them to go. Again, that's a risk they incur. If for some reason we don't move forward, then that's on them, but they can be ready for this year.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Mark, this is probably a question for you. Is chapter money even a viable option? Is there anything unallocated towards those funds that we could use on this
Yeah, there
project?
is chapter money available that you could use for this.
Thank you.
Hey, Mark, this just dawned on me because I know Karen had sent a note. Karen Galligan had sent a note when it came out a couple weeks ago. There's a road repair program that just came out that I think Southborough was allocated well over $200,000 for. Does this qualify or not?
I don't believe that it does, but I'm going to go take a, as the conversation goes on, I'm going to go back and take a look. I think she gave me a broad brush of it. I don't think it does, but
Okay. That would be too easy, right?
it really would be too easy. So, but if it works, I'm game.
But theoretically, because I think this is just probably helpful for people as they think about where we go or what recommendations we make. Let's just say it doesn't work for the culvert. It works for a lot of other things Karen probably was already planning to do with road maintenance or chapter 90. Granted, there's no shortage of things to do based on the quality of some roads in town, but there are other relief valves that continue to seem to open up here. Okay, Joe, I see your hand.
Yeah, so Mark, if we use chapter 90 money for this, then that's less chapter 90 money to use for another project, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it makes the pot a little bit smaller.
So it's just shifting it over.
Correct.
Yeah, from an ARPA perspective, yeah, I as you said at the meeting, Jason, that was absolutely an appropriate use for ARPA money if the select board and the will of the public decided to do that. If we're not taking from chapter 90, if we're not taking from this other road project, it would end up in the tax bucket. So it'd be almost like tax abatement money. Yeah, I mean, how much are we actually thinking that we might be able to get off? I mean, my first instinct, before the meeting was to say, hey, let's put this off. Let's let the market calm down a little bit. Let's, see if we can get some other cheaper bids. But, the question is, we're 80,000 over. How much do we actually expect that we could possibly get off if we rebid it again? I think that's the big question here. That's sort of the elephant in the room. If we're talking about 20 or 30, if all we're going to get back is $20,000 or $30,000 after waiting for 6 to 12 months, and we've put it off, and we're just making people angry for something that they want done, which is sort of what happened at the meeting.
But there's also no guarantee there's going to be any dollars off. It could be a premium of X amount that we don't know. Like, it's literally gambling, right? Of who has capacity and what's the price for the materials on the date we go out for the bid. If we were to rebid, I think is how I understood it.
Yeah. Well, before the meeting, it was, we don't have the same people in house and the materials price have gone up. And, if we're not rehiring to get those people back in house, well, then that savings just went out the window. And so we're already in a different price bracket to begin with. So, how long we want to put this off, I don't know. Before I was very resolute, this isn't a necessary road. It's not. And for full disclosure, Tony, who lives at the end of it is Andrea. She's the house on the north end of that road, as a matter of fact, which was a funny irony that I didn't know before town meeting. But my position on that road is still the same, which is it's not a necessary road, not in any way, shape, or form. I'm not even sure, and how much it's going to take to maintenance it over the next 5 to 10 years as well, on top of this money. So, if we did have a road plan, as we were talking about, we'd probably already know. And that would be really helpful to have known, because then the select board would also know how much this road was going to take to support on top of this over the next 5 to 10 years, and how much work is going to need to be done. Because last time I went down it is maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it was not in great shape then. So I don't know if any work had been done to it in the meantime. So I'm just wondering if this is sort of this is, looking towards the future of the town and where we want to allocate our road dollars. Is this road really worth all the money is the question I keep butting my head against, and I just don't know.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry, Mark. Another question for you. So
Sure.
the 70,000 state ARPA funds, you said you can probably get it extended till next June, possibly. I know that's theoretical. Is it, if it can be extended until next June, does it need to be used by then, or does there need to be a plan in place to use it by then?
And isn't it already extended till
Yeah,
next?
so
June?
it is already extended. We've signed a contract to extend it to June 30th of 23.
So does it have to be?
So
spent
yeah,
by
that's
then?
already done. It has to be spent by that date. Yeah, so it's not necessarily under contract. I think it has to be expended by that date.
And is there any ability to move it slightly into the next fiscal year, or does that coincide with the state's fiscal year?
Well, it's the state's ARPA money. So if they're going to extend it out again for us, I think we've got to have really something definitive to show them as to why we've waited another whole year and we still can't get this done.
Okay.
So while I've got the floor, I will tell you the RAP funding that the chair referred to. This would not be eligible for it. That can only be used for the rehab, reconstruction, resurfacing, or preservation of roadways, repair or replacement of traffic control devices, signage and guardrails, and road striping and painting. So this is all things that things we're talking about with Chapter 90 money and things like that. It's supposed to be for what they're calling winter repair for roads and surfaces, that saw some damage based on the winters. So it can't be used for this, but it can be used for other things that'll provide us some relief in other areas.
Okay, Karen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to figure out what we need to do tonight. Given what happened at town meeting, is it possible for us to continue to recommend not doing the Northborough Road culvert, or because town meeting voted the way they did, we have to move forward with that and figure out how we would pay for it?
We are under no obligation to do anything. I think what we're being asked to do is to provide a practical recommendation, taking into account what we heard, recognizing that was probably 1%, maybe 2% of the registered voters in the town, and just make a recommendation of what path to go down. It's not a binding recommendation, but it's certainly something that will have some weight to those that ultimately have to make the decision.
Okay, thank you.
I wish it was wish it was easier, but I think we need to probably determine whether we agree with my starting point of that it's the select board's responsibility to determine whether this is a priority road or not. And we're only answering the question if they affirmatively say yes. And that would be what our recommendations around. Does anyone disagree with that premise? Or think our committee needs to do anything more on that? Okay, so let's assume the select board believes very strongly that road needs to remain open. I think we're being asked for a recommendation of how to proceed. Do nothing yet, seek other funding mechanisms, or use available funding mechanisms. Tony, I saw your hand was up and down, so before I go to Joe, I'll
No, I wanted to hear what Tony had to say.
Thank you. I was just going to say that I agree, Jason. I think the select board has to decide if they want that road. And if they want that road, in my opinion, we should do the project now. Just identify whatever funds are necessary and do the road.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Do we know, is chapter 90 money a viable option for this? Does it fit the bill?
It does.
And road maintenance money is also viable, right? And ARPA.
Correct.
Yeah, but I appreciate that, but I mean, my sort of lone feeling on this is that I wouldn't do this road at the expense of so many of the other roads that I think are probably in need of work, given it's, I hate to go back to that unnecessary, but it's an unnecessary road. And so I'm not against doing it, but they might as well take the money out of ARPA, because we might as well be spending every dime we have on all the rest of the roads and do this as an extra at this point.
All right, so I'm trying to figure out where we're at. So Jeff, what's your view?
My view is we've got a $70,000 insurance policy that we have at least another year to use. And assuming that we can, I mean, we're also playing roulette here, right? But the cost could go up. So I don't think we're going to be able to find any other funds. So, provided that we can use some combination thereof of ARPA, road maintenance, or Chapter 90 funds, kind of given, again, it's only a very small portion, a very minority portion of the town that was at town meeting. I mean, there's extreme amount of vocal supporters of this project that were clearly upset about how some other funds have been used on road maintenance, including Chapter 90. And there is certainly, there's certainly a road that needs to be fixed. And, we've got some one-time money out there and an additional $70,000 to boot that can be used to fix the roads. I don't know. I think that if we can identify the available funds, it's at least worth pursuing, in my opinion. Not to say we're going to do it, but at least having an option out there where we've got identified funds for the project, and let the Board of Selectmen or Select Board have an opportunity to weigh in after that.
Karen?
Well, I think I understood you, Jason, to say that what we're doing is we're assuming that the select board is going to move forward with it, and what we're going to be recommending is where the funds are sourced from. Is that right?
In the timing, right? So a rebid is an option, right? I think
Okay.
Jeff's use of the words
Okay.
are right. So I do think we have the ability to recommend just saying the cost doesn't equal the benefit, if you believe that, right? I think that's kind of what Joe is saying when he takes, Joe, don't let me put words in your mouth, but that's kind of what I understood you to be saying is it's a big cost. We know it's a lot more than anyone was expecting to pay. Does that cost now exceed the benefit? I think we do need to weigh in on that a bit. But yeah, if they're going to keep the road open, they clearly need to do something, and this is the only way to fix it. So then it becomes a funding question and a timing question, because I'll sort of weigh in with my opinions because I've been kind of moderating to date. Is that July point that Mark made is really important to me. If it were up to me, I would let the market cool off, take a chance, and revisit this in the fall. But my fear is, even if you did that and you struck the bid the right way, and you actually kind of won, we still run the risk that you lose the state funding. And this road has now been closed over a year, I think. And how long can you keep it closed if it really is a necessary road? I realize there's probably different views of how necessary it is. So I do think there's a timing element to this here too, Karen, that we're being asked to kind of weigh in on. Given none of us are PEs right here in terms of engineers that could redesign a bid package or weigh in on that aspect of it.
Yeah, and in terms of timing, I think if we're going to do it, we should do it now. I just think there's too much risk in understanding what's going to happen with inflation and supply chain a year from now. So if we're going to do it, I think we should do it now. In terms of funding source, I think probably ARPA or Chapter 90. They're somewhat fungible, right? You know, if we use ARPA, I don't know I'm not sure what we would cut, but if we used, I don't know. So either ARPA or Chapter 90 funds.
Yeah, and my only concern with ARPA, I'll just weigh in on this, is we'll probably hear from Joe and Tony in a future agenda topic here and 2 agenda topics down. That committee put a lot of work in, and this wasn't on their radar screen. And we all understand why it wasn't on their radar screen. So I'm trying to also think about it of, you just had a committee go through 3 or 4 months worth of work. This wasn't even on their radar screen. And now if it went down that path, you could potentially be taking a chunk of the money they've allocated somewhere else after a true vetting process and arbitrarily doing it because of this bid process, and where that would have ranked in their survey process. So I don't know. And Tony, I'll let you and Joe weigh in on that, but that was one of my things. Go ahead, Mark.
So I do, I'm not trying to provide a path, but if the board did want to use ARPA and they wanted to try to keep the committee's recommendations for expenditures somewhat intact, there was a total of $500,000, which was used for, to help offset, tax rate reduction, some of which has already been assigned, by the board during the budget process. But I think it still was $390,000 roughly that was still available for assigning. So, there is money in there, they could say, and we're going to use $84,000 of that to help offset this project, which now keeps this amount, which doesn't get into some of the specific items the committee suggested.
That's fair.
There is a way to do this without, completely upsetting the entire apple cart of what the committee's work was.
Jeff, before I go to you, I just want to ask Joe and Tony, do you agree with Mark's assessment in that bucket as it existed on the slides that we were provided?
I would say that Mark's assessment is generally correct.
Okay.
I mean, it was supposed to offset taxes, but the way in which offsetting taxes was, we all knew, was however the board determines the way to do that. So if this project is going to be paid for at some point by the taxpayers, then paying for it is technically taking that off the board from a taxation rate. So was it exactly our intention? No, but like you said, it wasn't on our radar screen. So it's the purview of the board to interpret. And if Tony can say different, if he feels different, but the way that I looked at it was that, yeah, it's in their purview to make that decision. If it was going to hit the tax rate in any way and they decided they were going to pay for it instead out of ARPA, so be it.
Yeah, I think the ARPA committee did its job and is now effectively disbanded. If new information comes to light, the select board decides what they want to do. It would be great if it was within the spirit of what any particular committee has recommended, but it's their choice. So it does strike me that if this had been in front of the ARPA committee, we probably would have said, sure, cover that. But, if the select board wanted to fix that road, but it is just tax abatement money, it's just money. So I personally wouldn't object to that.
Jeff?
So just thinking outside the box here a little bit. I mean, if this road, has some impact on public safety, getting to locations quicker than having to go the other way around. I mean, is it possible to use some of the ambulance fund to offset some of this cost?
Not without a town meeting vote. And I think it kind of goes outside the spirit of the ambulance fund.
I'm just saying if it allows public safety to get to the location
But you
quicker.
need town meeting, Jeff, so you wouldn't, you'd have
Yeah.
to wait till the fall.
Okay.
Give you an A for creativity, though.
Sounds like
you.
something I would say.
Joe, you've been rubbing off on me for 2 years, so.
I wish it was easier, Jeff. All right. Let me try to summarize where I think we're at. I think in general, we're in agreement that it's the select board's decision to prioritize this road because we don't have any other data to prioritize it against everything else. I've heard a strong consensus that if we're going to do something to Northborough Road, the time is now. I've heard a lot of discussion of Chapter 90 road maintenance in ARPA. And I think the way to thread that needle is part of with what Mark has mentioned about tax relief, but also maybe putting a little pressure on the select board that, and kind of going back to the discussion we just had about the pavement management program, in that we don't want this project to come at the sacrifice of something else. That there are certainly some roads that we don't need any pavement management program to tell us need to be done ASAP, and really also use this maybe as an avenue to advocate that we do need to get moving on that next RFQ. We have the money available to do it. Sorry, RFP. And we need to go out to bid to do roads that are clearly in desperate repair. And we don't want this Northborough Road situation to be commingled with that. They should continue to independently move forward and not one at the sacrifice of another. I think, Joe, I'm trying to weave in your feedback because that's kind of where I'm at too, is on its own, I don't think this is the highest priority use of this money, but if the road's going to be open, it has to be fixed. And we know some people are using it in town, and it's been closed for a while.
I'd like to congratulate you on threading the needle pretty well right there. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate Karen's opinion. Like, look, if this is important enough to do, just do it. And I'm also of your opinion, which is like, this isn't really urgent. There are ways around it, and what's the actual cost of waiting? So you did really well. Thank you.
Okay. Now to try to formalize this into a motion. So I will move that the Capital Planning Committee support the sending of a letter to the select board in subsequent conversation around accepting the bid that came in just in advance of the annual town meeting, with the idea and premise that it be funded from ARPA, existing Chapter 90 or existing road maintenance funds, with the intent of no future town meeting authorization against the tax levy, with the understanding that we continue to work with the DPW superintendent of advancing the RFP for other roads that are in desperate need of repair in the town. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Can we add not at the expense of to the last bit of your statement? So it's not at the expense of critical road work in other
Yeah,
areas.
I will happily withdraw my motion.
Oh, I couldn't
and,
repeat what you said, so please don't ask me.
So I'm going to
Just-
remove, so I'm withdrawing my motion. And I probably couldn't repeat it again either, Joe. So I'm just going to make my same motion with the suggested words that you added. Is there a
Okay.
second to that?
Second.
Anyone need any clarification on that? Okay.
Can
I saw Karen's hand first, then Jeff.
Yeah, I'm taking the minutes. And I'm sure I did not get that verbatim.
We are now 54 minutes in, so you may want to go look at minute 53 and just type it down,
Okay.
and I'm happy to do it for you.
Okay, minute 53, got it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Can we add pursuit of, I don't remember the name of the program, the ongoing pursuit of the paved streets program, or whatever it's called you referred to, Jason and Mark?
The winterization.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's appropriate to document in the minutes that Mark will get a final determination on that, because I know he gave us his off the cuff, sort of interpretation of the documentation he had, but I don't know that I would put that in the actual motion because it's already a long motion.
Actually, my answer to the question when I answered Jeff's question, I was reading directly from the states what it's allowed to be used for. So
Okay, so you think it's pretty definitive, done deal?
yeah, that RAP funding can't be used for this.
No, I'm sorry. Maybe I should clarify. I meant that we, at the same time, will pursue that program for other endeavors for which we're taking away funding from road maintenance and Chapter 90 funding to fund this specific Northborough Road culvert. That's what I was trying to say when I said pursue.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if we're not pursuing that, we've got far bigger problems, because it's basically a giveaway, if you ask me. That's just my reading of that program, and there's plenty of things that could be used for. Okay, so you're okay with it not being part of the motion, Jeff, but being part of that?
Yeah, if it's documented and it's on the record, so.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? All right, roll call vote. Hark.
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Shoner,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. So that is unanimous. Next item are two new capital requests that came in from the town administrator related to the golf course. I would think in the future this will come from the golf course committee, but I know, Mark, they're just getting up and running, and I think Tony, you may be one of the new members. So Mark, everyone has the formal capital request forms. I don't know if there's any color commentary you want to add before I open it to the floor on both items. You can commingle them together in terms of things you want the committee to be aware of that maybe weren't readily apparent by the submission.
Sure. These are items that we've been talking about, I think, for a number of years, whether it be informally in terms of the paving of the golf road, John Wilson Drive, and also the golf parking lot area. We've talked about this ever since the course was relocated and the construction was completed. There's always been a significant amount of dust kicked up. The road runs right along the side of where all the cruisers are parked. So it makes some additional responsibilities and upkeep on the cruisers because they're continually getting covered in dust. We have had issues. I think, complaints from golfers as well as residents saying, why aren't we paving this? Why can't we pave it? We did finally get confirmation that the stormwater management calculations were sufficient for Conservation Commission to agree that the surface could be paved, and striped. And so now it's simply, a funding issue. The irrigation is something that the management company and I have talked about on and off for a number of years. If you look at that course in July and August, you'll see it becomes a true links course. It browns out. It plays a whole lot differently, and probably affects the number of rounds that people will go out and play on it. I forget if it was last year or the year before, we had a lot of rain, and that course stayed green all year, and they saw a tremendous amount of rounds. And so right now there is irrigation on the course. It's mainly located around the greens. They would like to to run essentially one irrigation line down most fairways, a couple of the fairways where they get a little bit wide, two lines down those fairways. And, they're going to be connecting into town water. So it's going to be more water that is going to be sold for that purpose. It is something I think to increase and continue the viability of the course. And I have reached out to the CPC chair to see the viability of putting in applications for both of these. I think irrigation may have more of a viability than paving the lot, but who's to say? I'm waiting to hear back. But given that these are capital items and are something that, regardless of the funding source, I think the capital may look to, or maybe asked to help slot in a particular year, or to help to provide a funding source for at some point in the future, should some of these ideas not turn out the way we hope. I wanted to get them in the plan for the committee at least to have for consideration, so that it's not something that comes in off the cuff. It's something that we've had discussions about and put in and thought about as to where we think it should be funded.
Okay, and Mark, I know you checked FY '24 on the forms, but in an ideal world, if CPC comes back and says, yes, we'd entertain an application on both, would you prioritize one over the other if you had to phase it over a few year period? And what would be the timing of trying to submit that application?
So I think it depends on whether or not CPC would be willing to entertain something for the fall town meeting. I think if I had to pick, I probably would say irrigation. I do know that based on the proposed cost of the project, I have had conversations with Mr. Ballantyne as to what if we did a 5-year bond. I think the cost of the 5-year bond started out around 46,000 and change, and by the end of the 5th year, we were down around $41,000. The town does, through the management contract, receive back some funds that are from the management company based on rounds played, that are put into a revolving fund that can only be spent on items for the golf course. So money comes back to us from the golf course that really can only go back into the operation. We're taking in, for the past couple of years, it's been more and more funds. I think that we may be able to to do a 5-year bond, which could be paid from golf revenue from the course. So therefore, we'd be looking to do a borrowing potentially at a fall town meeting. This is if CPC decided not to. This is something they didn't see as viable. This may be something that we could set up, that we could do a bond, which would be paid for from golf receipts. And that would allow that project, if I understand correctly from the management company, they'd rather do that near the end of the season. So probably they would look to start that somewhere in the middle to latter part of September. Probably would take about 6 weeks to do. And then hopefully beginning of November, first, second week of November, the testing of the system would be completed, and everything would be ready and in place to roll for the beginning of the following season. So if we didn't do anything this fall, we could look to do something in the spring. But so they wouldn't look to do the work until that September timeframe anyway. Doing something, getting the money and the approval at town meeting this year would simply mean that it was going to happen next year. So it is something that could wait until the spring if we wanted to follow that route.
In the paving, there's no way that that's going to be included in Karen's next bid unless that gets delayed, correct? Because there is no available funding source for that.
There
with golf
isn't.
revenue, for example.
Yeah, there isn't. And, as Karen described it to me, and I'm not going to do it justice, there's a different cost structure from paving a parking lot than there is in paving a road.
So we would do an independent bid, is what you're suggesting?
It would be cheaper. It would be cheaper to do an independent bid for that.
Okay.
from what I understand from her, it would be, it's a different type of paving doing a parking lot than it is doing a road.
Okay. All right, Joe, I'm gonna go to you. I saw your hand up and down a few times.
Yeah, as new questions kept hitting me. Mark got rid of one, and then there was another one. I had a couple questions on the proposals themselves. One of which was on the parking lot one, where it was, what was this? There's one item for 75,000, I believe, which is I don't know, it's bit construction miscellaneous work, but it was about half of that bid. And I was wondering what specifically that was. And that was for the parking lot.
Without looking at it, I'm not quite sure
Okay.
whether that's the cost of the bituminous itself.
Oh,
Um,
the bit would make sense.
bituminous concrete is basically what you call pavement.
Okay, okay, because I saw there was also hot mix asphalt sidewalk or driveway on the and down below. Okay, so that's essentially for all the mix they're gonna have to use. Is that road only go from the back of the emergency building? Is that just that stretch that runs along the back and then the parking
Yeah.
lot?
Yeah, that
Okay.
access road
Okay.
just simply runs from the front parking lot for public safety, in between Woodward and public safety, and then it just blossoms out into the parking lot out behind public safety.
Okay.
Yep.
And I am surprised that there isn't a more comprehensive sprinkler system on there. I was wondering if the golf course, if there had been any work on the golf course that would determine how much money might be saved by putting in the sprinkler system, meaning how much of the lawn work that goes on from one year to the next is correcting for not having proper watering and conditions for the grass that they're growing. Because that can get really expensive if you're constantly having to reseed and
Sure.
retreat the lawn. And I know that the topsoil in some of those areas is not very thick. So I have played that course once or twice back in the past.
Yeah,
So
no, I think that's a good question, and I'm not sure that we've taken a look at what may be saved in annual maintenance costs or repair costs, to fix certain areas that may be alleviated if you had some proper irrigation.
Okay. And you said in one of your points that you thought, was it both projects or just one of the projects might be supported by revenues from the golf course? Possibly.
I think the irrigation one would be, at least in my conversations with Mr. Ballantyne, and just taking a quick look, what if we did a 5-year bond for irrigation? What would that cost? And running that through the calculator and making certain assumptions, I think that we would be able to fund that out of golf revenue if we were to do that. The paving is a whole nother animal, and I'm not quite sure that we could do that. We couldn't do both. And if I had to pick one, I think I would pick the irrigation. I think, the management company would pick the irrigation as well.
I would tend to agree, although I know that there is certainly an impetus to make smaller bonds, but in terms of the parking lot, I really look at that, maybe that could be stretched out to 10. And if, depending on the irrigation system, depending on how often that's going to have to be maintenance, if that could actually be a 10-year investment, maybe matching them both out to 10 years and putting them both on, putting on 10-year bond, if that could then be more readily supported, then I think that would be a much better time frame to bond those for. I don't know.
So
Federations are using for 5 years, really, but
I think the only trouble I think you're going to have with that, Joe, is that, and we tend to run into this when you're doing a bond. The bond council is going to say you can't do a bond longer than either the lifespan of the improvement or of your ability for that obligation to exist. So right now we have a 5-year contract with the management company. The select board has the option of 2 1-year extensions, so a maximum of 7 years. This was the first year of that agreement. So you couldn't do a bond if you were going to do it out of golf revenue. You have no idea what's going to happen beyond this contract. So your bond would need to be within this existing contract. So good point of, well, look,
but I appreciate what you're saying, but we are
Yeah.
the actual owners of the course, correct?
We are.
So we own the asset regardless of anything that happens. So I would with all due respect, I would tend to look at it and say, hey, we own it. If we want a 10-year bond because we think it's a 10-year investment and we can justify that, I really would very strongly put that we should be putting that in the 10-year category, put them both on there, put them both out there and try and make it work.
But if our
I don't
our
wanna-
revenue to pay the bond is dependent upon our contract with the management company, which expires on a 10-year deal, a 10-year bond, 3 years before the bond ends. I don't
Yeah,
think, I'd ask Mr. Ballantyne to weigh in on that, but I don't think bond council is going to sign off on that.
But
And
it would have to
therefore,
be
it's
as a
not going to be a viable bid.
That's something we'd have to look at.
So
Fair enough. Fair enough.
go ahead, Tony, then I'm going to try to round this out a little bit.
I was just going to observe that I don't think the discussion tonight requires us to resolve how we would pay for this, correct? This is just an introductory discussion this evening.
That's exactly how I was going to round it out.
I
So,
just want it
thank
put
you.
on the plan. I don't want to figure it out yet.
So I
So
think we've had an introductory conversation and we can move on.
yeah. So Mark, I think you have some to-dos that you owe us, particularly related to CPA. I think what we should do as a committee is put it, what I will term a placeholder on the capital plan for these two items, subject to much further conversation and prioritization. Is anyone not kind of aligned along that front? Okay, then I will move that the capital planning committee support the addition of the parking lot paving and irrigation to the FY 24 capital plan with funding source TBD, subject to future discussions and prioritization against other capital needs of the town.
Second.
Second by Joe. Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Hark,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Joner,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski is aye. Next item, ARPA committee. So Joe and Tony, we have a placeholder normally for this, but I decided to take it out of members report and add it as a full-blown discussion, given that final presentation. Before I hand the floor over to you to just add anything you want to add, I just wanted to acknowledge the amount of work that went into not only obviously your own personal time commitments on this, but obviously your fellow members. And, you know, I personally have not watched all your meetings or read all your minutes, but just looking at the meeting schedule and given that your committee was a more consistent committee posting for meetings than any other in town over the last 3 months, I just wanted to thank all of you for your efforts in bringing it forward. And on behalf of obviously capital planning that had 2 members, just the time that you all took in addition to your other commitments to see that through to the end. Because I'm not sure we all knew what you were signing up for when you volunteered yourselves originally either. So thank you for that. I guess we all have the presentation you made to the select board. Joe had provided that for our packet. Are there any comments or things you want to highlight specifically related to capital that we should be aware of or future discussions on that?
Tony, you got anything? No?
I think our presentation was pretty representative of where we ended as a committee. So I don't really, not aware there's anything else we need to discuss at this point.
I think the only things that I would point out were, you know, if you look at the summary page, I think that there was a good amount of capital investment in this plan. I think there are one of the big things that stands out at me is the technology infrastructure updates, which would include the Wi-Fi and the town website. The Wi-Fi was what came through us that we sort of put a $250,000 tag on, but that project's going to be revisited. So we'll have to figure out whether that figure is going to work moving forward and what we might have to add or possibly save from it.
Can you define what you mean by revisited? Like, is there a thought it could go up, down?
Well, we don't know
No,
because
no.
Jason hasn't put together a proposal to really run through us. And that was and the 250,000 was a leftover from the last director of technology. So, I think Tony has a little better idea, having dealt with tech issues, as to how realistic that figure is. But even still, we didn't see any type of proposal as to how detailed, how many things were going to be included in that Wi-Fi plan. So
I was the member of the ARPA committee that talked a little bit to our technology team in Southborough, and I think it's fair to say they need to work a little bit more to come forward with a concrete proposal. And I think when there is such a proposal, then we should consider it.
Okay.
I think, the committee did pay close attention when you came in about the senior center, which is nice that that's going to get done. I think that's one of the big things in there. I think one thing that we're going to have to revisit is what we were going to be willing to commit to sidewalks in the next couple of years, to either augment that money that was put in by ARPA to see what projects can get done. Karen came in and gave I don't want to say uncomplimentary thing. She tried to be very realistic in her recommendations, but the amounts of money that she thought that she could practically spend upon projects and the amounts may not be, we're going to have to revisit in terms of project by project and trying to get that spent. And I would say encouraging her to take the opportunity on the town's behalf to maybe go a little bit farther than what she originally thought, which was, she asked for about 400,000. And we recommended far above that because we felt that it was important for the town and for the insistence of the people that did the survey and spoke to us in other ways. So I know this committee doesn't originate projects all the time, but we do have you submitted the master plan to us, which was very nice, because in the master plan, among other things, are prioritizing of those. And so that's something that we'll have to revisit. I also don't think we will see
I
anything.
just want to correct you. I assume you're
Okay.
talking about the capital plan, not the master plan.
Well, yes, in the bundle that you sent out to us is the master plan, isn't it?
That's the next agenda item.
Yes, but I was complimenting you on the fact that, we also did look at the prioritization of sidewalks and what could get done, which was kind of important. So there are certainly items on this list that we're going to be looking at, that we're going to have to look at and evaluate in the next year to fully flesh out how ARPA money can be most properly used, because it's not specific project based in a lot of it. It's just an amount.
Jeff, Karen, do you have any questions on ARPA or observations?
Yeah, maybe one question I had, not necessarily capital related, but Joe, I did notice a placeholder in there still for the strategic consulting, I think is what it was. And is there
Tony may fill in wherever I get this wrong, because I part of it is that we have an ARPA consultant and we're going to have to pass things through ARPA consultant here and there to get things done. And also there's administrative paperwork to get that submitted to the federal government. There was also some other consultant fees that were wrapped in from the select board. Tony may remember what those were about. I don't remember exactly what those were about, but they were related not mostly to ARPA, but not just to ARPA, I think. But they don't know what the actual total number is going to be. So that figure that you're seeing is probably likely to be less, but it can't be guaranteed. And as with a lot of the things on this list, there is money that, because it's an amount of money, not necessarily a project itself with fully fleshed out details. Some of that, to use the word that was used earlier, fungible. Some of this money will shift from one category to another, depending on how the select board wants to do it and how much money actually is needed per project versus what the actual number in that plan is. So if, some of that will shift around.
Jeff, you good? Karen?
Yes.
Yeah, one quick question. What is, under some of them, like property tax abatement, the cost is 500,000, and then it says including money already allocated for FY '23. What does that mean?
The Board of Selectmen had already they took it upon themselves to allocate money. Say, for instance, $20,000 was allocated to the senior center at the start. And so like that was, we counted that in tax abatement, but then moved that to the senior center project afterwards. But they had things that they already wanted to pay for out of ARPA. And so
That's they being,
by the time the report was really done, they'd already pretty much allotted about $110,000 worth of that tax abatement money to different items that they wanted to pay for.
okay, they being the select board, Joe?
Correct.
Okay.
We
thank you.
did not have any spending control. We are only an advisory committee.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to make one observation on the back end. I thought it was great that each of the slides had a link to the master plan. I candidly would have liked another line for a link to the capital plan where applicable, because I think there were items that have nothing to do with capital, and I don't plan to offer any sort of opinion on those. My main question, and I think I've asked it in prior meetings, is by my count, there's at least 5 items in the recommendations that aren't even on the capital plan. And this isn't really a question, Joe, for you, Tony, or any members of your committee. It's really a question for the select board, is whether they want capital to vet those items and get them on the capital plan, especially if they choose not to use ARPA for it. There's the Wi-Fi is a great example, Joe, right? Let's just say that's not ready, etc. It's already on the capital plan, but is that the right amount anymore? Because even though there seemed to be a lot of consensus in your surveys around the senior center, and we've obviously lived through that since our inception as a committee, is 400 the right number? I don't think any one of us can say that without a re-review of that project, which was forthcoming for the FY23. Sorry, I guess it would be FY24 now capital plan. So I don't know if there's any question for that, but I guess I just wanted to make sure that at least we as a capital committee thought that that was the right path forward to comply with the capital policy that the select board already has in place, of just trying to mirror the 2 documents if they plan to proceed with the recommendations that were made.
That's a very fair point. And well, and the senior center, I think that may get done long before 24. They seem ready to hit the ground.
I agree, because they already allocated the 20K, but John Parent's ultimately going to get a bid, right? He's gonna put something out, and there's going to be a public bid process. I would assume, like, what if the number comes in at 500? Is that still, there's the cost benefit there? What if it comes in at 200? Did someone understand the proposal? So I think there's just some more work there too, but I hear you on your point there. Anything else for the ARPA committee? All right, I guess we can take this one off the agenda until the select board asks for any sort of opinion on the items we haven't talked about yet. The next is the master plan committee report. Again, I have not candidly followed all their work. I know it's been going on many years through the pandemic, but if you look at the number of names that were involved in just the sheer detail in this report, I think we were all very well served as residents of the community by their work. I was particularly intrigued by the back part of the report, not that the front part wasn't great, on the implementation plan. I think that's obviously something we've been very focused on related to capital items, and it was nice to see candidly names, i.e. committees, next to some of these items to try to action, progress on them to the extent possible. So kudos to all of those that were involved. I know Lisa on our committee was a member of that committee, and I wish she was here tonight to just expand on any of the work that they did, but kudos to all of those involved. What I wanted to do here is because there is a public comment period, and I don't know the level of detail that everyone got through the document that was in the package. See if anyone was interested in sending a letter as capital planning, if there were items that we wanted to address as a committee. Otherwise, the opportunity exists for us as individuals to submit it, but I don't think we will be having another meeting before their public comment period ends. And given that we not only are referenced in it, but there are also numerous capital related items in it, thought it was important to at least bring it forward for discussion. So that I'm going to pause and see what all of you have to say. Go ahead, Joe.
I did not read it in with the respect of thinking of our committee in mind when I did, but I did send a letter off to Lisa congratulating them because I thought they did a really nice job in this of putting actionable directives in where when considering how to get a project done. I thought that was really, really nice to see in this plan and something that they had obviously done a lot of thinking on and done really good job on. Which is not what you see in a lot of these things, which drives you nuts. But now that you've put it to me, I will try and put my other hat on. I'd also like to say about 3/4 of the way through, my brain did sort of go into meltdown. So, it was overload after I tried to do it in a day and it's just.
Maybe with that comment, Joe, I may reiterate what Ms. Luttrell actually said, if I remember correctly, in the opening when she made an update in Article 1 at town meeting. They did that all themselves. We used to pay. There was some consulting at the very beginning, full disclosure, but they used to pay someone to do that. And I just think if you actually look at the prior version versus the current version, I mean, that's just even more impressive. Did anyone else have a chance or any commentary to bring here?
I mean, I read it. I'd say from a capital perspective, I would say that they hit it spot on in terms of kind of the nature and the involvement of the committee. It's all short-term focus with ongoing responsibilities. And that's kind of how we've been attacking these over the past couple of years. And I think that they really hit that one. Right. So that's my feedback or my comment, I guess. Nothing changed or nothing critical. I think they're focused on that the right way.
Good, Karen.
I'm not sure that I understand the comprehensive objectives of the master plan, but I was surprised to see that there was nothing in there about carbon reduction. They did have a section on climate resilience, but that's something, completely different than carbon reduction. Would you consider that part of the charter of the master plan, or is that outside of the master plan?
I am not even going to attempt to answer that question. I do see that 2 members of the master plan are in our audience. If they want to answer it now, that's great. If they would like us to just formally submit it, Karen, I would suggest you pose that question because you are obviously well versed in that area, and they can probably walk you through it far better than we can attempt to. I'm not seeing a hand related to that. So Karen, I think that's a question to just submit in.
I'll do that. Thanks.
And there was a specific email. I'll send it around the committee, but they have a special email account. So I don't know how the distribution works, but I'll send that just to make sure everyone's aware of it. Go ahead, Jeff.
Jason, I thought I saw a goal in the master plan about that when I read through it.
There was one I saw, but I think Karen, it looks like Karen also may be frozen. Yeah. There was a goal there that, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like they tie together based on Karen's commentary. I was going to throw one observation out. Like I mentioned before, focused on the implementation plan on the back part of the document, which obviously was multiple pages. There was one thing that really piqued my interest from a capital perspective, given the amount of time we've spent on this item already, and I don't see it going away, was just the concept of a community center. If you think about all the space needs studies we did, the presentations we had, there is one goal that specifically actions the select board for it. There's another one under recreation that actions recreation around it. I'm not advocating that we put capital planning in either of those spots. My recommendation was going to be one, that be streamlined, because I think the concept of a community center encompasses many different community groups, not just recreation. So I personally, based on what we've heard and learned through our space needs study, didn't necessarily think that it belonged there. I know that they would be a huge user and beneficiary of a potential community center, but what I was going to recommend is that there be some sort of designation like there was for the biking and sidewalk creation of a committee, that there be a community center study committee really be what the action is that the select board take, and then the plan around it be action to that committee, because there's obviously a ton of user groups, as we saw back in January with our presentation, that would not only benefit from it, but want to have a voice in it. And I look back to the what they called the St. Mark's Golf Course Committee back in 2015-16 and how that came together. That's how we ended up with the public safety building and the golf course, and not candidly a community center in the middle of that golf course. And I think the number of constituents from various committees that had, obviously a vested interest in certain things, but bringing together a collaborative plan was the right one. So I was planning to submit something along those lines. If our committee doesn't believe in that, I'll submit it just as a individual resident. But I thought it was important for us to at least discuss, because we candidly have been kind of the center of that circle since the beginning of this. So I don't know if there's any thoughts one way or another of that, or any strong opinions. Good, Tony.
I think that's a very good suggestion, Jason.
Okay. Is everyone comfortable with me doing that as the capital planning committee and not as an individual? Okay, I'm seeing yeses. Is there anything else you want to discuss on the master plan? Good, Tony.
I need to drop off, Jason. So
Okay.
I will leave you all and see you next time.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. All right. Last item before public comment is the Q3 status report and discussion on additional data for future periods. So thank you to Brian and Carla in particular for pulling this together, and to the various department heads for filling it out. This is our attempt to start to get real-time tracking on a quarterly basis, as everyone's aware, of all capital expenditures. We've even gone as far as adding what was just approved at town meeting into the tracking. Obviously, nothing has been spent yet. And naturally, I think any capital projects that become ARPA related, any sort of funding source, really trying to capture it. So I would break this conversation into two buckets. One, is there anything that people wanted to see that wasn't in this report that I think would be helpful for the future so that we can continue to tweak it? And then two, are there any questions on the status of any individual project, realizing we may need to pull a department head into a future discussion, but I didn't want to just have all of them come and be on standby. So that's really what I was looking to achieve with this report. So I guess let's start with formatting and content. Is there anything anyone wished was in here that wasn't, or wanted more detail on? Go ahead, Joe.
Just relating to what you just said, so money hasn't actually changed hands for any of these?
Sorry, this is looking at all capital articles that were open coming into the fiscal year.
Right.
Some were approved 5 years ago. For example, the public safety building, approved 5 years ago. There was the remaining payment on that went out this year from from the bond proceeds. So it looks at any active capital project, regardless of year, that was open coming into the year, what was spent during the year, and what remains as of today, and the status of such project. Some you see have been zeroed out by town meeting action because we return the funds. Others, are going to be around with us for a while.
Yeah, it's just the way that this is stated where it says ordered awaiting build, but then it says paid to lease.
That's the you're on the lease tab.
I just have an Excel spreadsheet in front of me.
Yeah, if you look, you sounds like you're on the lease tab, which I'll have Brian walk through what those column headings mean. But the more prevalent tab, given that leasing appears to have been a one-time item, at least based on the last year's experience, it's the tab over to the far left, Joe. That says Q3 on it. I don't know if you follow that or not.
No, this isn't. Okay, wait a minute.
Brian, while Joe
Okay,
tries.
I think I
that
get where you're
tab.
going. Okay.
Can you just explain the lease terms, just so everyone's on the same page?
Yeah, we just added, so the leases are 5 or 7 years, and what we're doing is we're tracking them by year, the amount spent on, each of those installments or, each of those payment plans, so you can see each year how much pay down we have on each project. So if it's not clear, I can try to clarify it on the right, if you have suggestions on the titles or anything, but that's basically the purpose of it.
Yeah, so Joe, one is the lease payments and one is the actual amount spent on the actual asset.
Oh, no, that's not what never mind. I'm
Okay.
looking through the other ones instead.
Does anyone have any other commentary on the report? I would just say if you do think of something, an email to Brian and Carla, they can start thinking about how they'll do it for purposes of year end. And my understanding is that this will then be included in the select board's quarterly review moving forward too. So we'll try to time our meetings so that we review it first before it goes there, if we can line all our ducks up in a row. Okay. There any question on the actual project status of anything you see here? Okay. Anything else on this topic? I will acknowledge public comment and also acknowledge that there are no members of the public remaining. And go to meeting schedule. So I'd like to see what happens from a road maintenance perspective at the select board next week when they take kind of action on some of the things we're sending and determine our next meeting date. My goal is to do it before kind of the true summer months hit, so that we can come up with our game plan for next year's capital requests and kind of organize a schedule of when those department heads will come and submit all their documentation if they haven't already submitted it. So my intention would be to have a June meeting, but I'll be in touch on a date. It wouldn't be for another couple of weeks though. And I'll try to get us back to Monday nights. That work? I would also like everyone to start thinking about prioritization and how we start to achieve something around that, like high, medium, low, if possible, because we're not going to be able to do everything that's on the capital plan coming up, and we're going to have to start making some tough decisions. So if there's any evaluation criteria that we can start to use that goes beyond anything we already have in the capital policy, I'd ask people to bring those opinions and thoughts to our next meeting, and there'll be an agenda item for it. Any other business? I will make a motion to adjourn then. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff. Roll call vote. Hark,
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye.
and Malinowski's aye. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.